Okay, so I'm going to just show you how to export your QGIS maps or data to Illustrator or Inkscape. It's not too difficult, especially in the newer versions of QGIS. So what we're going to do is, right now I have OpenStreetMap layers set up, and we're going to kind of zoom in there and just, let's say you're designing the interface between a suburban and natural setting. And what we have right now is a base map, and this will print out as a raster file. And what we want is some vectors to show you how this works. And so we're going to use QuickOSM. We're going to open it up. We're going to use Canvas Extent. We are going to query the buildings. We're going to run that query. And what we're going to get back is all the building footprints of the area on the canvas. We also want to go ahead and get the roads in this area, so we're going to use the secondary roads and run that, and then we're going to just get rid of that dialog. And so right now we don't need the point, so we'll get rid of that, remove those layers, and we'll just change this styling a little bit. We're going to go ahead and make that black, and we're going to do a little bit thicker line so that we can see that. We'll leave the buildings as is. And one thing you're going to want to do though is, if you're going to take roads and export them into SVG or even PDS, you're going to want to go ahead and turn that road into one line. So you dissolve all those highway secondaries into one. You run that, we have one line. We're going to go ahead, right click on that, go to styles, copy styles, all style categories, right click on this, styles, paste style, and then you just simply redo that. And then we'll get rid of this layer and use that as our road layer. So that's simple enough. And now we have one line instead of a bunch of multi-parts. And then what we're going to do is, in order to get this to our Illustrator or Inkscape project, you can export or import from the canvas layer view. That is not, you don't have as much control over what you're getting though, so I don't generally use that too often. You can export to a PNG or a PDF or even a DXF, which doesn't work very well. I've tried it, I've worked with it a bit. It's very, very tricky, but you're going to want to go to, let's say, a new print layer, and we'll call this the PDF. We'll call it the SVG print layout. And then one thing I like to do is, in a print layout right away, is show a grid and snap to grid, so that I have the ability to put the items in the places that I want them to be. We're going to go ahead and make the grid spacing 1/2 inch. And then we're also going to right click on the view here, go to page properties, and change what that is. So that will be just a letter landscape. So, and then I'm going to add a map using that grid. I'm going to go ahead and create a frame, make it thicker. So then we have the map set up, and let's say we also want to put in an arrow, a north arrow, and scale. And so then you have those up here, and that's great. So let's say we have our map all figured out how we want it. And now what we want to do is we want to finesse it and add things in Illustrator or Inkscape and use that program to do what we need to do instead of messing around with it anymore in QGIS. So that's easy to do. You just go up to here. You can either export it as a PDF or as an SVG. So there's just basically a negative and a plus for either one of these. So if we do an SVG, let's call it SVG. We'll save that. We want to export map layer as SVG groups. We're always export as vectors, etc., etc. And you can choose whether or not you want the text to be a path or a text object. So you can go ahead and export that. It'll take a little while because we have a lot of little vector layers with the buildings. So that will take a minute. And then let's also export it as a PDF, and we'll call that PDF now. and we'll do a similar thing, export as vectors, we'll put georeference information on there. Always export text as paths. We'll do the text objects again, and we'll save that. And so that's a little faster, that's a little smaller of a file, and now I'll show you what happens if you open them up in Inkscape. Okay, so now we're in Inkscape. You can also use Illustrator to open up either of these files, but I just wanted to show you the upside and the downside to either the PDF or the SVG. So we're going to open up the SVG first, and what you're going to get is something like this. And so now we can manipulate all the objects as we need to, and we can also change the text as needed as well. We can increase the size, change the font. That is a small, strange font, and so on and so forth. And you can also obviously you can add, you can change the fill and stroke of any of the objects. Not too much of a difficulty, same as always here. So you can do this and that as needed in Illustrator or Inkscape. So you can see how that's useful. And yeah, the main downside to the SVG export is this clipping doesn't work correctly. But I can also show you if we do the PDF, then there's sides to that as well. So it clips correctly, and one thing you're going to want to do with the PDF is select all and just ungroup that with Shift Control G or ungroup, and that gives you access to all the objects a little bit easier. So let's just go ahead and zoom in. So you can see you have access to these objects. You can change them just like with the SVG. This is the PDF again. The fill and stroke you can change, and so on and so forth. So they work pretty much the same. The main difference is that with the PDF, you're going to have to be managing your objects without any grouping. So these are all the path names, all under the single auspices of PDF. This is your entire, this is all your group that you have. You just have PDF and everything else is named in its own fashion. So there's no real help in terms of organization. So the PDF has a downside of that and the upside that it clips correctly. So I generally prefer SVG because I like to have things in group so that I can organize it and add and subtract things as needed. So thank you very much, and if you enjoyed this and this was helpful to you, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks.